Thanks for being here. You could be anywhere and you chose to be here. This is Lily, and this is Affirming Self. Guys, I am so excited today because I feel like this is something that I personally need to hear because I am the master. I am the master of choosing to avoid things that aren't working. Let me ask you something. Is there an area of life that feels stuck, but you haven't really looked at why? There's something to that. There's this thing that we all get to face, and it's a choice. And the choice is to look at our life or not. And there's two sides of this coin, because once you choose to look at your life, you can choose to look at it carefully and closely, honestly, authentically, or you can choose to not look at it at all. And I have been in both camps, let me tell you. And I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong way to be, in the sense of you just get to acknowledge that you are in a certain space. And in my past, I have done a really great job of avoiding. And this is even after I took a look at life and noticed that, hey, there's some things that are not working. And I went through some pretty rough patches of really identifying the things that weren't working. And I will totally admit, there's this one memory that comes to mind. It was probably about 3 years ago now, maybe 4 years ago now. I was involved in a personal development course, and I had a coach. She's amazing. I remember talking with her regarding something that was going on, something I didn't see, and I saw it for really what felt like the first time, and it really wasn't. It was just she wasn't allowing me to escape myself and look at this particular item. I don't even remember what it was, to be perfectly honest with you. However, it was incredibly impactful because that likely was one of the first times in my adult life where, in an intense way, I was faced with this idea of denial versus awareness. And what I mean by that is, by being aware of something, that's helpful because now you're aware of it. But here's the thing they don't really talk about is that once you're aware, you get to be responsible for what you choose to do with that. So when you're aware of something, whether it's a bad habit, maybe you're aware that you chew with your mouth open. I don't know where this particular example came from. It just seemed to be the one to choose for this example. But you're chewing with your mouth open and somebody tells you, and that's something you don't want to do because you'd like to be engaged in a variety of social circles, and you realize it's not going to cut it to be chewing with your mouth open. So you can choose in the moment to be like, oh, okay, thank you, I so appreciate it. Or maybe you'll have a different response. Maybe you'll kind of get into this whole thing of shame and guilt and, ooh, I'm seen. That's a whole nother podcast. However, the point I can touch on with this is that once you're aware, as I said, you get to be responsible for that. Now, where it kind of jumps into the space of denial is when you're aware of it and you're like, oh no, that's not an issue, or oh, that's just one thing because, it's just one person. And then it could get to the point where there's multiple people telling you the same thing, and then it gets really loud. But the longer you choose to push it off and not do anything about it, you may get to the place where people aren't going to invite you out as much. You won't have access to activities or people that you'd like. And this might be in a really extreme example. However, what I'm trying to get to in mentioning this even is that when you choose avoiding discomfort, it can keep you from change. And when you choose to not change, that's where it can get messy, because here you are with these hopes and dreams. There's these things you've been developing, whether it be on your own or with a group of people. And as much as it sounds ridiculous about the chewing with your mouth open example, that can keep you eventually from other people and actually allowing yourself to grow and develop. And that's why you're here. So it may be uncomfortable having this conversation. However, I think it's incredibly important that we talk about this now, because we don't want to get to that space down the line where you choose to wake up or whatever. So everybody's in their different spaces of development, and you're like, oh wait, I literally missed out on 10 years and I could have done XYZ, and now I realize this was keeping me from this particular this particular access to goals. And I want to be clear, I'm not trying to be overly obnoxious with the chewing with the mouth open thing. It was just something that came to mind. So, moving on from that, I think it's important that we look at patterns. Patterns are really important to pay attention to. Okay? So, I'm going to share with you a little bit of a list that I've found through personal development training, and also looking back on different times in my life of, oh, this is actually what's happening. So if you'd like, I invite you to take out a journal, maybe the one that you write in when we talk about things here. And to be clear, I say this, I think, enough. This isn't just for you. This is also for me a reminder, because I find myself getting in patterns and ruts and stuff all the time. I'm just owning it because I'm human. You're human. We're walking through this together. So please, my hope and my heart is that you hear this as me coming alongside you with a helping hand. We are choosing to embark on this journey together. And if you're new here, I'm so glad you chose to listen to this episode today. And if you are been walking, and if you are someone who's been with me from the beginning, thank you so much for continuing to choose to walk with me. It means a lot. So here's the brief list of common signs something isn't working. And it's a very short list. It's only 3 items. And I'm going to go into aspects of each because it's important to dive in a little deeper. So I'm going to stop with the prelude, interlude, whatever that is. We're just going to go for it. So here's the list. 3 things: burnout, resentment, and avoidance. So burnout can look at, one of the things I really appreciate about doing these podcasts is I get to jump in and to learn and to exercise my mind and to really represence myself to certain things that I've noticed in the past with myself. And then it's like, oh, where in my life am I doing that? So let's jump in. Number one, burnout. So we may recognize this in terms of the textbook definition that essentially it's a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion. So this can be caused by a lot of different things. One of the things that I think is most common, and from what I've looked at, it seems that it's prolonged stress. And a lot of times people like to link it to work-related stress. And I think it's actually just in general, if we're spreading ourselves too thin, or we've talked about this before, that if you try the same thing over and over again and you're looking for a different result, that's madness, right? So some of the symptoms I think that we may forget is fatigue, or common symptoms are, proper English, fatigue, lack of motivation, feelings of helplessness, and physical ailments. This could be like headaches, gut problems. This can also be something that gets deeper if you allow it to, such as depression, if it's not addressed. So we're going to talk about the other items that I mentioned, and we may come back to discussing other support in the form of mental health professionals. I am not a mental health professional. I want to be very clear. I have done therapy over the years in different spaces, but I just wanted to make that disclaimer. The other one I think is important to touch on, and I've given you a list, so I don't know why I do this thing where I backtrack. And then I just do this weird thing of like repeating myself 17 times. I think it's because I'm trying to get back into the vibe, because sometimes when I just record these, I'm just sitting here wherever I am, and then I'm just talking, and then I have like an area of where I want to go, but then I feel like we're talking around in circles. But I promise, just about everything does have a point. So resentment. So this is like bitter indignation at having been treated unfairly. Okay, so this could be in general like feeling of displeasure, or indignation, as I mentioned, for in regards to some particular act or remark. Maybe it's a person. This can be regarded as causing an injury or an insult. I think as people, when we're in relationships, this happens a lot with unrequited love quite a lot, because there's this idea that you love this person, or you think it's love. Whether it is or isn't is neither here nor there, but you have a person who's choosing to want to put in more effort than you are, and they're doing all these different things to please you or to win you over, if you will. And then it gets to the point where they feel like they're being taken advantage of because you haven't responded in the way that you feel, that they feel you should be responding to. And I think that it's something that people unknowingly do, because this goes back to something I've mentioned in a previous episode about attachment styles. I don't go into a lot of detail. I really just referenced one, which is the anxious attachment style. Anyway, that's another bunny trail for a different day. And actually, something to note too with resentment is that it's actually a complex, multi-layered emotion. And this is something that is been described as a mixture of disappointment, disgust, anger, and fear. And I would like to say that if you're somebody who is on the beginning healing journey, I would say that it's more, those emotions are directed more towards the other person because they're not seeing their responsibility in it, whether or not people want to agree with me or not. I think that's the truth. I've seen it in myself and in other friends' lives who've gone through things. So the difference is, I think as you go along on your healing journey, there's an aspect where you may feel all those things towards yourself, because this is going off of the idea that I mentioned earlier of perhaps you've had your attention to it, you've had the awareness, and now you're not in that place of just, you're aware of it, you're no longer in denial, you're being in that process of starting to take responsibility for it. The next one, avoidance. This is my favorite. Said no one ever. I only say this because if you ask people that know me, I avoid a lot, or I have in the past. So if we want to get textbooky over here with the definition, this is essentially the action of keeping away from or not doing something, or or the action of preventing something from happening. So this is particularly, I actually really appreciate this, where we get a little bit more intensely into the definition. And I found this, and I thought this was really interesting for a couple of reasons. That avoidance, yes, it refers to the act of staying away from or withdrawing from doing something or not doing something or preventing something from happening. However, I think it goes deeper. And like, as I said, as I was looking into this definition, I thought this was very interesting. Is it identifies that it's not just a generic something. It goes into a particular, it goes into specifics, is what I'm trying to say. It's looks at staying away from or withdrawing from a situation, person, or activity. And this is often due to anticipated discomfort or harm. Another thing, it can also mean not doing something or preventing something from happening. And when you look at this in psychology, or in psychological terms rather, avoidance is the practice of keeping away from particular situations or individuals because of the expected negative consequences or painful feelings associated with them. And I'd like to note, in my personal experience, it's not so much of the actual person giving negative consequences to you as an individual, or they're literally trying to initiate painful feelings associated with them. A lot of times this goes back to what I've talked about with, I think it was a podcast or two ago. I would need to go back and look, but the idea of like these stories we create for ourselves. I mentioned it about our own ability to create and perform, because we have a tendency to lack our own ability, but that's really just one story that's rooted in the whole self-worth and capability, or the feel of failure or success. What I'm referring to here is that with our brain, it is meant to keep us safe. So the whole fight or flight thing is a real deal. And so many times people are people, and they're saying what they're saying And it's not a good or a bad thing. They're just saying what they're saying. I also want to be clear. When I say it's not good or bad, it's just what they're saying. I'm not meaning it in a callous way as if to desensitize you from the actions. Like, we all get that there's contexts from which we all come from, and we all have these certain social structures that are in place from the time that we're little, and the society and our cultural backgrounds that we grow up in. So it's not so much that it's not good or bad, it's our perception of what's actually happening in the moment and in the behavior. So one of the things I'm coming to terms with, and I have been for years, it's just settling now more so, is that we need to get out of our heads so much and be thinking about the outside and others. And you might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with avoidance? Well, the thing is that when we don't want to take responsibility for something, or we don't want to face something, we avoid it because we don't want to face this idea of rejection or harsh words. Sometimes I think that it's even just feedback of how to create something better, or to readjust or realign. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. So enough about those 3 points. Let's kind of move into this new space of choosing responsibility over blame. And so I touched on it briefly with the commentary about when you're aware versus denial, and then you're moving into the healing space from no longer looking at those feelings when you're interacting with resentment, and particularly with the relationship piece. Let's look at it from the space of, you're no longer blaming the other person, but you're blaming yourself now for acknowledging those behaviors that people would consider toxic. Well, really, you're just trying to connect. You're reaching out for connection in those spaces. So let's talk about not blaming yourself and reclaiming your power. And when I say power, I'm not trying to mean this whole like weird thing like in the ether that, oh, you're going to throw a thunderbolt. No, I don't mean that. What I'm talking about is understanding that you have the ability to make choices and to help you stay on your own 2 feet. And that, as I've said before in other podcasts, that you were created for a purpose. You were created by God. And so because we're made in his image, we have the ability to create and to do things. So that's what I mean by reclaiming power, or what I'd like to think of it as rediscovering your identity in him. Now, if you're listening to this podcast and that's not your jam, that's okay. My hope is that from what I share, that there is something for you to take from this as well. Okay, moving right along. So when you're taking ownership, this doesn't mean that you're going, oh, I did this again, bang, 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 your head against a brick wall. It means that you see whatever it is that you're doing, right? So let's go back to the beginning example of the chewing with your mouth open. And you go, oh, I have been doing this. And this is something that I would like to stop. It doesn't mean that you sit there and go, I'm a horrible person because I eat with my mouth open. What it means is that you get to make the cognizant choice moving forward to not do it, and to perhaps invite people in for accountability. Now, I would only recommend you doing that if that's something that you would really want to do, and maybe only have a few people do it, because you don't want like everybody at a table of 10, getting on you about that, because we're not here to babysit each other. There's a difference between that idea of babysitting each other and being in community and supporting and coming alongside each other. So it's just a matter of the level of support you're looking for, and it's a matter of understanding the level of support you need and knowing yourself and what you're willing to do or not do. So, this is an exciting piece. I'm still talking about choosing responsibility over blame, because I think this is something that I've grown in the last few years. There's a good friend of mine. We were in the process of formulating a nonprofit together, and the long story short is it didn't work out for reasons, and it was one of the most valuable experiences of my life. And the reason why I say that is because I met this person through a personal development program, and we were in the same group, and we just seemed to connect and hit it off. Fast forward some time, we gone through a lot of different aspects in our relationship, but one of the things that I appreciated and still appreciate about him is that he took the time to support me by disrupting my excuses. And it's not just him that did this, it's other people as well. What was significant about him disrupting these thought patterns is I no longer allow myself to spin my wheels too much. It still happens sometimes because, hey, I'm human. I'm not perfect. However, it's just different, and it's very minimal. And there was a lot of hard moments and a lot of up and downs in that friendship that I still have to this day, just to be clear. It just really supported me, along with others, of really understanding that I do have a choice in the matter. And when I have the choice in the matter, it doesn't mean that I kind of lost my train of thought. Oh, but like, it doesn't mean that I was bad or whatever in that space, but there's a lot of things I was working through. And when he chose to support me in that way and where I am now, it allows me to see how far I've come and how I've responded in relationships myself. I think back to different friends where they may be expressing different things in their life, and in some ways I know that I came across as not caring towards them, because unknowingly, and I admit this, I didn't ask them if they wanted me to hold them accountable for certain things. And so I just started, disrupting things like that or whatever. And it's not bad that I chose to do it. It's just what I chose to do in the moment. And looking back on it, I acknowledge that not everybody wants this. Isn't there this, there's this quote, I think it's from The Devil Wears Prada, I think it is. I'm trying to remember. Yes. It's from The Devil's Wear Prada. Let's see here. I'm really kind of wanting to find this really quick because I think it's really important. So I'm seeing if I can find this. Wait, is this the whole thing? Holy cow, hold on a second. I gotta find this. This is gonna... Okay, so I'm gonna be very upfront with I have not seen this particular movie, but from what I gather, from what I've heard, is that it's kind of this nuanced part where there's the irony where the assistant is trying to voice her thoughts and feelings about stuff. I don't actually remember. Okay. So the line's something like this. That's not what I... No, that was different. I didn't have a choice. Oh, no, you chose. You chose to get ahead. You want this life. Those choices are necessary. But what if this isn't what I want? I mean, what if I don't want to live the way you live? Don't be ridiculous, Andrea. Everybody wants this. Everybody wants to be us. And so here's the thing. I just, the meme, I guess they call it a meme these days, is where... I guess it's also a trend on TikTok. It has been off and on, but it's like, don't be ridiculous, Andrea. Everybody wants this. And then it usually shows some sort of ironic piece of film, whether it's like something that people don't actually want. The idea, I guess, what I feel like it gets across is when I've walked through that space with different friends and realized I didn't ask, and I don't think I apologized either. So if you're listening to this and I did that to you, I apologize. But when you don't ask and you just do those things, that can be really disruptive. And this may have no actual connection to this at all. And it actually does, because I could sit here and blame all the situations that I was going through and everything, but I'm choosing to take responsibility. I'm not blaming myself. I'm saying, okay, yes, I did that. That wasn't okay. And I know that that doesn't work in relationships. So, when you choose to actually think about what it is you need to be taking ownership of, and you want to actually change that thing to realign to whatever your values are and whatever your hopes and dreams are, it's going to be a game changer. So, we've talked about responsibility. We need to go into the next part of it because I think it's something that I need to get to, because I want to make sure that everyone is getting the support that they need. So here's the thing. The power of naming it is huge. I invite you. Name what's not working and why without judgment. Can you do that? I'm going to do that. I think I just did. Talking real about it. The whole just putting myself on other people and giving advice when they didn't even want it. Now, it's not to say people don't want advice from me, and it's not about making myself sound like I'm bigger or better than I am, because I'm not. I'm a human being. However, throughout my life, I've had the opportunity and the honor of people coming to me with advice. So I just noted about what I have done with friends, disrupting things they didn't even ask me to disrupt. And even if I thought I was helping them, it actually hurt the friendship. So enough about that. What I would like to acknowledge is when you name the thing, what's not working and why, without judgment, it allows you to actually make the difference that you want in your life. So this next part I'm excited about. I'd like for you to grab your journal and we're going to do a little exercise. Man, I feel like these get harder and harder sometimes. But at the same time, it's not, because it's just conversation. And thanks for choosing to stick it out if you're still listening, because I know these particular things are not easy. Even though we can like have a nice chat and go through certain things, it doesn't necessarily mean that the work that we do, that I choose to do or you choose to do or we choose to do, is easy. So I just like for you to get really honest with yourself. And I'd like for you to think about some of the things that are not working so well. Maybe there's something about your job. Maybe it's a relationship. And maybe it's not. Maybe everything's just going super well. But just for the sake of doing so, write down something that may not be working. Or maybe it's kind of working. And here's the thing. One of the things I've noticed in my life is when I think something is kind of working, it's likely because I'm avoiding actually looking at the fact that it's really not. And I'm actually being delulu about it. So write down the things that are not working or kind of working but really aren't working, if we're honest with ourselves. And I'd like for you to be with yourself. You can even pause this podcast if you'd like, so you can do this exercise. And I'd like for you to sit and think maybe a minute or two about what items or pieces in that choice, that list, what about it isn't working? And then I'd like you to think about what it is that you're already doing in that space. Kind of determine like what's missing, right? And then what are you going to do in place of that? And here's the thing. If you do that list and you don't know like what you can do, feel free and shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'm totally happy to connect with you about that. It's hard to look at these things and incredibly crucial. But once you have looked at what's not working or what's kind of working, like maybe you could, and I meant to say this, I'll say it now. Look at, what's going well. Like, hey, this is a good thing. But also see, okay, well, what's missing? Like, maybe it's that, here's a good example. This has been one for me in the past. Maybe something that I've been working on, I'm working at work or something, and what's working is that I'm going to work and I'm present. And what's not working, or maybe what's missing, is that I'm not getting things done on time. Well, what am I doing? Well, let's say I know for myself, I'm putting other tasks before the more critical tasks, or I'm talking too much and it's not giving me the amount of time that I need to work on whatever project. Let's say those are the things that are not working. So now I get to look at what am I going to put in, or what am I going to choose differently, because those actions don't serve me, right? Maybe I'll do things like setting a timer of how long I'm going to work on something and be really intentional about it. I'm going to dedicate 15 minutes, 20 minutes to whatever task. Maybe it's I'm going to choose to do those tasks or work on that task in the very beginning of the day. I've read and listened to a number of books over the last couple of years, and it seems to be a consistent thing that it's actually a waste of time for you to first thing in the morning when you get to work. And this is granted you've had a good night's sleep, you've had a good breakfast, that you check email in the morning. And I'm not saying don't check email. I want to be clear because, there are things that you do need to check. Be mindful though. That's when your brain is the most up and at 'em. I think it's like 8 to 9, I guess, is when you're the most active. I need to look at that. Please don't quote me on that, but that is what I've heard and I think I've read. It's a couple of places. So, the point about that is that you should be working on the more taxing tasks so then that you can give the work the best part of yourself. So that's a personal example. And like I said, if you have some things that you're trying to work through or write down on a piece of paper and you're not exactly sure what to replace it with, that's totally cool. I get it. Just reach out via Instagram. I have no problem connecting with you on that. It's actually makes my my heart happy to connect and to all the things. So anyway, we're moving on. I hope that you found that incredibly helpful. I've really enjoyed talking with you on this episode because I think that this is something that, though I'm still working through aspects of this with different areas of life, because hello, we're all living, we're moving forward, and we're all in different places. However, the work is never done. And I think it's a joy to have the opportunity to wake up each day and to find ways how to make things better, not just for myself, but for other people. So something I'd like for you to keep in mind, that you are worthy of a life that feels aligned. Getting honest is a powerful act of self-respect. And when you allow yourself to do things that support you in your growth and being your best self, it actually supports the people around you, and you're actually able to pour from a cup that's not empty. These are words that I'm saying to myself too, because I can easily run myself into the ground when I'm not careful. And that's just honesty. Burning the candle at all ends rather than both ends, just all of the ends. It's just a giant flaming wick thing in my hand. Anyway, okay, that was kind of silly. All right. Really though, thanks for being here. You could be anywhere and you chose to be here. This is Lily with Affirming Self. Whatever time of day it is, whether it's morning, afternoon, or night, I hope that you have a wonderful day. If you have found this to be something that has been thought-provoking, helpful, blessed your soul, please like, subscribe, share, comment. It's all helpful at the end of the day. So, until next time.